How does a grown son feel safe saying something like that in public, in front of family and strangers? Why did everyone at that table act like I deserved it? And how did it turn into 1 week where he lost his ride, his spending money, and his place to sleep? My name is Evan Cross. I am 48 years old. I work in risk and compliance at a regional bank. My job is simple to explain, even if it feels heavy some days. I look for problems before they become disasters. I read policies. I check dates and signatures. I keep things clean. That habit followed me into my personal life. My divorce from Lena was 2 years behind me when this started. On paper, it was calm. No loud scenes in court. No public fighting. We told people we were doing what was best for our son, Kyle. We said we would keep things respectful. In real life, respectful slowly turned into expected. Kyle was 20. He lived with his mother most of the time. He was in community college. He also had a way of treating support like air, like it was just there, and nobody had to talk about it. I still paid for many small things. Not because I wanted praise, and not because I thought it would buy love. I did it because it kept Kyle stable. It kept him moving forward, a phone line, a little monthly spending, part of his car costs, his insurance. It was not one big bill that made headlines. It was 100 quiet taps that added up. At first, Kyle thanked me. He used short, normal words. He sounded like himself. Then Lena remarried. Her new husband was Grant Mercer. He was around my age, but he carried himself like a man performing for an audience. He dressed sharp. He used big, confident phrases. He talked like he was always giving a speech. He was friendly in a way that felt planned. He smiled a lot, but his eyes stayed cold. The first few times I met him, I kept it polite. I told myself it did not matter. Kyle having another adult in his life could be a good thing, but a pattern formed. When Grant was around, Kyle's tone changed. Kyle stopped asking. He started telling. He stopped saying thank you. He started acting like I was late on my duties. Lena did not correct him. Lena watched it happen and called it Kyle being honest. She said he was just finding his voice. She said I should not take it personally. She also said more than once that Kyle needed strong examples. Those words always landed in the same place, like a quiet verdict. I did not argue. I did not send long messages. I did not write emotional paragraphs. I simply kept doing what I had been doing. I paid what I had agreed to pay and a few extra things that kept Kyle from falling behind. I learned a long time ago that some people confuse calm with surrender. They see silence and think it means they have won. One Tuesday evening, Lena texted me and said she wanted to have a family dinner. She said it would be good for Kyle. She said Grant wanted peace. She said we were all adults and we could be civil. I read the message twice. I could already guess what it was. Lena liked public settings when she wanted control. She liked witnesses. She liked to look reasonable. Still, I agreed. I told myself I was showing Kyle how adults handle tension. I told myself I could sit through a meal and go home. I told myself it was not worth creating another story. The restaurant was an Italian place near downtown. Warm light, white plates, soft music, the kind of place where people speak a little quieter because the room feels expensive. I arrived a few minutes early. I sat at a table near the center, not tucked away. I did not want a corner. I did not want to look like I was hiding. I ordered water and waited. Lena and Grant walked in together. Kyle followed behind them. Lena hugged Kyle first. She smiled at Grant. Then she greeted me like I was a coworker. She said my name in a careful tone and asked how work was. Grant shook my hand with a firm grip. He used my first name like we were old friends. He said he was glad I could make it. He said it was important to keep things positive. Kyle sat down and did not look at me right away. He kept his phone in his hand even as he sat. His thumb moved across the screen like the dinner was background noise. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I asked Kyle how school was going. He gave a short answer without detail. I asked about his classes. He shrugged and said it was fine. Lena talked about her job. Grant talked about his plans. Grant spoke the most. He described himself like a man listing achievements. He talked about responsibility. He talked about taking care of a household. He said Kyle was lucky to have structure. I listened. I sipped water. I nodded when it made sense. A waiter brought bread and oil. Grant made a small show of ordering for the table, like he was the host. He asked Lena and Kyle what they wanted, then looked at me last. He said I could get whatever I liked, of course. It was a small thing, but small things are how patterns show themselves. As the meal went on, Grant kept steering the conversation toward what he called real life. He talked about bills. He talked about discipline. He talked about what a young man needs in order to become stable. Each time, Kyle leaned in a little more. Kyle started echoing phrases. Kyle started looking at Grant for approval. Lena watched with a proud expression, like she was watching a performance go well. I tried again to talk to Kyle in a normal way. I asked if he had thought about summer work. I asked if he wanted to look at internships. I offered to review a resume. Kyle responded by saying he had it handled. He said Grant was showing him the right way to think. He said people who worry about forms and rules miss the point. That line was aimed at me. It did not even try to hide it. Grant smiled like that was exactly what he wanted. He said Kyle was learning confidence. He said young men need confidence, not hesitation. I kept my face calm. I told Kyle that confidence was useful, but planning mattered too. I said that if he ever wanted help, he could call me. Kyle did not say yes. He did not say no. He only looked at me like I was talking about something old and slow. Then Lena leaned forward and said we should be honest tonight. She said it was good to clear the air. She said Kyle had feelings he needed to share. Kyle sat back in his chair. He looked around the room first, like checking who could hear. Then he looked at me. He said I had become hard to respect. He said I was always quiet. He said I never took charge. He said Grant showed what a husband and a father should look like. He said Grant did not hesitate. He said Grant did not act unsure. He did not speak like a son talking to a parent. He spoke like a judge announcing a sentence. Lena did not stop him. She nodded. She said Kyle was being brave. Grant did not stop him either. Grant placed his hand on Kyle's shoulder for a second, like a coach rewarding a player. Then Grant looked at me and said he hoped I could take it as feedback. He said men grow when they can accept hard truths. I let the words pass through me. I felt heat in my chest, but it did not turn into an outburst. I have seen too many meetings where the loud person wins because the calm person loses control. I did not want to give them that. I asked Kyle, in a steady voice, what he wanted from me. I asked what the purpose of this dinner was. Kyle said the purpose was to stop pretending. He said I should accept my place. He said Grant was the one leading now. Then Kyle said the harsh line he came to deliver. He said it loudly enough that nearby tables could hear. He said it with a smile like he expected laughter or support. The room did not laugh. The room went quiet in that way public places do when something private turns sharp. I noticed 2 phones. One was in Kyle's hand, angled slightly. The other was on the table near Lena's elbow, screen facing outward like it had been placed there on purpose. I did not know for sure if anything was being recorded, but I understood the possibility. I looked at Kyle, I looked at Lena, I looked at Grant. I told Kyle I heard him. I told Lena I understood that she wanted a new story. I told Grant I appreciated his concern. My tone stayed flat and polite. I did not defend myself with speeches. I did not argue about who I was or what I had done. I did not list sacrifices. I did not ask for gratitude. I asked the waiter for the check for my items only. Grant tried to say he would cover it. He said it in a way that sounded generous, but felt like a final move, like he wanted the last image to be him paying while I sat there. I told him I had it. I said I was fine. Lena said I was being dramatic. She said I should stay and talk. She said leaving would prove Kyle's point. I told her I was not leaving to prove anything. I told her I was leaving because I had heard what I needed to hear. Kyle rolled his eyes. He said I always walked away. He said I could not handle honest words. I stood up. I pushed in my chair. I put cash on the table for my part and a tip. I did not slam anything. I did not raise my voice. I simply left. Outside, the air was cold enough to clear my head. The streetlights made the pavement look wet, even though it was dry. I walked to my car and sat for a moment before starting the engine. My phone lit up in my hand. It was a spending alert tied to Kyle's card. The alert was small, but it felt loud in my hand. It showed a charge at a clothing store near campus. Not rent, not books, not food. A clothing store, late at night, right after a dinner where I was treated like a guest in my own family. I sat there in my car and looked at the screen until it dimmed. Then I turned the phone over and stared through the windshield. I did not feel anger the way people expect. I felt something cleaner. I felt the shape of the problem. Kyle was not confused. Kyle was not struggling in silence. Kyle was choosing a story, and my money was helping him perform it. I started the engine and drove home. I kept the radio off. The quiet helped me think. When I got home, I walked into my kitchen and did the same thing I always did after a hard day. I washed my hands. I put my keys in the same spot. I checked the mail. I moved like routine could protect me from feelings. Then I made tea and sat at the table with my phone. I opened my banking app. I looked at the authorized card tied to my account, the one Kyle used. I did not touch anything yet. I only looked. People imagine support as one big thing, a car, a tuition payment, a dramatic gift. My situation was smaller and more constant. Kyle's phone line was under my plan. It was easier when he was younger, and nobody ever pushed to change it after the divorce. Kyle's insurance was connected to my payments because my name was still tied to the vehicle in certain ways. Kyle's spending card had a limit that I set months ago, back when he still said thank you without being reminded. Over time, the card became normal to him. He swiped it like it was his own. He used it like I was a silent building under his feet. Lena knew it too. She never said it directly, but she liked that I carried the quiet load. It made her life smoother, and it allowed her to present her new life as comfortable. That was the part that used to confuse me. Lena would say Grant was now the strong leader. She would say Kyle needed a real example. She would say I should step back and let Grant be the main guide. But none of that came with Grant taking the boring bills. Grant liked the big gestures. Grant liked the picture. Grant liked being seen. He did not like being responsible for the slow, unglamorous parts. I had seen it before, long before the dinner. The first time I met Grant, it was outside Lena's house. I was dropping off a box of Kyle's things. Grant stepped out like he was greeting a visitor to his property. He smiled and shook my hand. He said he appreciated how easy I was making things. He said not every man could be mature. I told him I was not doing it for him. I told him I was doing it for Kyle. Grant nodded like he agreed, but his face said he did not care about the reason. He cared that I was compliant. After that, he started appearing more. He would be in the kitchen when I came to pick up Kyle. He would be in the driveway when I dropped Kyle off. He would stand close, not threatening, just present, like a reminder. Kyle watched it. Kyle adjusted. Kyle began to speak to me differently. He used less warmth. He used more judgment. If I asked about school, he gave short answers. If I offered help, he acted like I was trying to control him. One afternoon, months before the dinner, Kyle called me to say the car needed repairs. He did not ask. He said it like a fact, like a bill I should already be paying. I told him to send me the estimate first. I told him I wanted to see what the shop was recommending. Kyle sighed and said Grant would have handled it without questions. He said Grant understood what a young man needed. I remember how calm my voice sounded when I replied. I told Kyle that questions are part of handling things. I told him I was responsible for what my name was attached to, so I needed details. Kyle sent the estimate later. It was inflated. It included things that were not urgent. I paid for what was necessary and told him the rest could wait. Kyle did not thank me. He only sent a short reply and went quiet for a week. Lena later told me I was being controlling. She said Kyle needed freedom. She said I was damaging his confidence. That word again, confidence. In their mouths, it meant one thing. It meant doing whatever felt good in the moment and calling it strength. My own story with Kyle was very different. When Kyle was little, he was the kind of kid who built careful projects. He lined up small pieces and made plans. He asked questions. He wanted to understand how things worked. I used to sit with him on the floor and help him. I showed him how to measure twice before cutting once. I taught him how to keep notes. I taught him how to fix a mistake without throwing the whole thing away. After the divorce, I tried to keep those habits alive. I offered to help him with school deadlines. I offered to help him apply for work. I offered to teach him budgeting. I offered to take him to lunch just to talk. Sometimes he came. Sometimes he showed up and stared at his phone the whole time. Then Grant entered the frame, and Kyle started treating my calm like it was weakness. It did not happen overnight. It happened in small scenes that were easy to deny later. At a community center fundraiser, Lena invited me because Kyle was volunteering. She said it would mean a lot to Kyle if both parents were there. I agreed. I wore a simple button-down and arrived on time. Grant was there too. He moved through the room like a host. He shook hands, laughed, and held a drink like a prop. He introduced Lena to people with pride. He introduced Kyle like a young man he was shaping into something great. When I approached, Grant included me with a polite smile. He said this was Kyle's father, and he said it like the last part was optional. A woman near the table said it was nice that we could all be friends. Grant answered for everyone. He said we were all on the same team now. He said what mattered was Kyle having the right influence. Kyle stood next to him and nodded, enjoying the attention. I tried to speak directly to Kyle. I told him I was proud of him for volunteering. I asked him how the event was going. Kyle gave me a small smile, then looked back at Grant as if checking where he belonged. Later, I walked past a side hallway and heard Kyle speaking to another student. Kyle said he did not really need me anymore. He said his mom's husband was showing him how life works. He said I was more like a backup. I did not interrupt. I did not step in and demand respect. I simply kept walking. I did not want to be the man making a scene at a fundraiser, but I remembered every word. That is another thing people misunderstand about quiet men. Silence is not the same as forgetting. The dinner was not the first time Kyle tried to place me below someone else. It was only the first time he did it in front of strangers with that kind of volume. After I finished my tea, I went into my home office. It was a small room with a desk, a shelf of binders, and an old printer. It was not a dramatic space. It was practical. I sat down and opened a simple spreadsheet on my laptop. I started listing what I had been covering for Kyle since the divorce. Not as a complaint, as a record, phone line, insurance portion, monthly spending, car maintenance, occasional course fees, small transfers when he said he was short. Each item had a date range, each item had an amount. I typed slowly, making sure it was accurate. I also opened my message history with Kyle. I scrolled back through months. I noticed the change the way you notice a room getting colder, fewer complete sentences, more demands, more comparison to Grant, more phrases about me needing to accept my place. I took screenshots of the most important ones and saved them in a folder. I named the folder by month. I did not show anyone. I did not send them to Lena. I did not send them to Kyle. I did not threaten. I only organized. My phone buzzed again. It was Lena. She asked if I was home. She asked if I had calmed down. She said Kyle was upset because I walked out. She said my leaving proved I could not handle the truth. I replied that I was fine. I told her I was not interested in arguing. I told her I had heard what I needed to hear. Lena answered that Kyle deserved support, not silence. She said Kyle was a young man and he needed stability. She said I should not punish him for being honest. That line almost made me laugh, but I did not. I had learned that laughter can sound like cruelty when people want to be the victim. I replied that I was not punishing anyone. I told her I was thinking. Lena responded that thinking was what held me back. She said men who lead do not hesitate. She said that was why Kyle admired Grant. I read it twice, then set the phone down. There was a time when those words would have pushed me into a long explanation. I would have listed what I had done. I would have argued about character. I would have asked her to stop turning my son into a judge. That night, I did not do any of that. I thought about my job. In compliance, people can talk all day. They can claim they meant well. They can say they were under pressure. None of it matters if the record is clear. The record was becoming clear. Kyle wanted adult status when it came to respect. Kyle wanted me to accept that I was not his main authority anymore. But Kyle still wanted child status when it came to access. He wanted to spend, drive, and lean on my name without offering basic decency. Those two things cannot live in the same house. The next morning, I went to work like normal. I parked in the same spot. I greeted the same receptionist. I answered emails. I attended meetings. In the afternoon, my friend Omar stopped by my desk. Omar had the kind of calm that comes from years of seeing people create their own problems. He asked if I was okay. He said I seemed quieter than usual. I told him I had a family issue. I told him I was handling it. Omar said family issues can pull you into choices you later regret. He said it is best to keep communication clean. He said if I was going to set boundaries, I should do it clearly, without emotion, and with a record. I nodded. I told him that was already my style. That evening, Kyle finally messaged me directly. He said the dinner was necessary. He said I needed to stop acting like a victim. He said I should accept that Grant was the real example now. He said I was making things hard by refusing to adjust. He said if I wanted to be in his life, I needed to be useful, not sensitive. I stared at the screen. I did not reply right away. I copied the message into my folder and saved it with the date. Then I wrote a reply that was short and plain. I told Kyle I had heard him. I told him I was going to make some changes in how I support him. I told him we could talk soon. Kyle replied with a single word that meant he expected me to fold. I did not fold. I closed my laptop and looked around the office. The room was quiet except for the hum of the printer in the corner. On my wall, a calendar hung with the month clearly visible. My days were scheduled with normal things, meetings, deadlines, chores. I stared at the date for the following week and felt something settle inside me. If Kyle wanted to be an adult, I was going to treat him like one, and I was going to do it the right way. The next few days felt ordinary on the outside. I went to work. I answered emails. I cooked simple meals. I folded laundry. I slept and woke up on time. But inside, my mind kept returning to the same question. What was my role now in their story? Kyle wanted to treat me like a background character. Lena seemed comfortable with that. Grant was clearly enjoying it. I did not want a battle. I did not want to prove I was more. I only wanted something basic. I wanted respect, or at least neutrality, if respect was too much for them. 2 days after the dinner, Kyle texted me again. He said he needed money for a campus fee. He said it was urgent. He said he was tired of me making everything complicated. I read it slowly. It was not the request that bothered me. It was the tone. It was the assumption. It was the way he mixed need with entitlement, as if I was a service he paid for. I replied that I needed details first. I asked what the fee was for and when it was due. I asked for a screenshot or an email from the school. Kyle did not answer those questions. He only repeated that it was urgent. He said Grant would not ask for proof. He said Grant understood trust. That sentence told me more than Kyle realized. Kyle did not want trust. He wanted access. Later that night, Lena texted me too. She said Kyle was stressed. She said I was making things harder by asking questions. She said I should just help and stop acting cold. I wrote back that I was not acting cold. I told her I was being responsible. I told her I would not send money without basic information. Lena answered that I always hid behind rules. She said I used rules to avoid emotions. She said Kyle needed support, not policies. I read that and felt the familiar pull to explain myself. I could have written a long message about how rules protect people. I could have written a long message about how I had been supportive for years. I could have written a long message about how my calm was not emptiness. Instead, I wrote one short line. I told her I understood what she thought, and I was still asking for details. I put the phone down and sat in silence. I watched the kitchen clock. The second hand moved steadily. The sound was steady too, like it did not care about my personal problems. The next morning, Kyle finally sent a screenshot. It was not a school fee. It was an online purchase confirmation for a sports event near campus. It was framed like a fee, but it was not. It was entertainment. I stared at it and felt the last piece click into place. Kyle was testing me. He was checking what he could rename and reshape until I gave in. He was learning that if he called something important, I should pay. And if I asked questions, he could shame me. That afternoon, Kyle asked to meet near campus. He said he wanted to talk in person. He said texting was not fair. He said he wanted to clear the air. I agreed, but I chose the place. I told him we could meet in the campus parking lot near the student center in daylight with people around. I did not want a private setting. I did not want another dinner table with phones pointed at me. When I arrived, Kyle was already there. He leaned against the car like it was his. Not something he used because I made it possible. He wore new shoes. I recognized the brand from the alert that night. He did not greet me like a son greeting his father. He greeted me like a disappointed customer greeting a worker. He told me I embarrassed him at the restaurant. He said people noticed. He said leaving made me look small. He said Grant had to calm everyone down after I left. I listened without interrupting. I watched his face while he spoke. I noticed how quickly he repeated Grant's style. The confident tone, the moral language, the way he acted like he was teaching me a lesson. When he finished, I asked him one question. I asked what he wanted from me now. Kyle said he wanted me to accept the new reality. He said Lena had moved on. He said Grant was a better example. He said I needed to stop trying to be important. He said my job was to support his future and stay out of the way. Then he added a new demand. He said he wanted the spending limit raised. He said he needed more freedom. He said it was unfair that I controlled the amount. I asked him why he needed more. Kyle said he was building his image. He said connections mattered. He said he could not look cheap around people. He said he did not want to be the only one who could not keep up. I felt something tighten in my stomach, but I kept my tone even. I told him I would not fund an image. Kyle's face shifted. He said I was jealous. He said I was old-fashioned. He said I was bitter because Lena chose someone better. I did not respond to the personal attacks. I did not tell him he was being disrespectful. I did not try to win him back with emotion. I only returned to the facts. I asked if he thought respect was optional when money was involved. Kyle shrugged and said respect was earned. He said I had not earned it. That line was the line, not because it hurt. It did hurt, but pain was not the main issue. The main issue was the logic behind it. Kyle was saying I should keep paying even if he treated me poorly, because he was allowed to decide whether I deserved basic decency. That is not a family relationship. That is a control arrangement. I told Kyle I heard him. I told him I would think about what he said. I told him I would text him later. Kyle looked satisfied. He said he knew I would come around. He said I always did. He said I was predictable. I got back into my car and drove away. I did not speed. I did not slam the door. I did not make a show. I simply left. On the drive home, I kept seeing the way he leaned against the car. I kept seeing the way he spoke about my role like it was a job title. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment with the engine off. The garage door was closed. The house looked quiet. Nothing about my life looked dramatic from the outside. I walked into the garage and turned on the overhead light. The car paperwork was in a small plastic folder on a shelf. I took it down and placed it on the workbench. I did not open it right away. I only set it there and looked at it like it was a puzzle piece I had been ignoring. There are things people do not think about when they are young. Names on documents, liability, insurance responsibility, who gets the call when something goes wrong, who is accountable when a situation becomes expensive. Kyle did not think about those things. Kyle thought about status and feelings. Grant thought about appearance. Lena thought about comfort. I thought about responsibility. I carried the folder into my home office and placed it next to my laptop. Then I sat down and opened the spreadsheet again. I added a new section. I wrote down every support item that had a switch attached to it, things that were not court-ordered, things that existed because I had kept them in place for Kyle's convenience, the phone line, the spending card, the insurance arrangement, the car access, the occasional transfers. I did not type threats. I typed categories, dates, and next steps. I wrote them like a checklist at work. Then I opened my message folder and added the campus conversation notes. I wrote them as simple statements. I noted the date and time. I noted what Kyle asked for and how he framed it. I saved the file and backed it up onto the small USB drive I had set on my desk earlier that week. It was not dramatic. It was not secret. It was just a habit. One copy on the computer, one copy somewhere else. Around that time, my sister Tanya called me. Tanya had always been direct with me. She did not like pretending. She asked how I was doing, and I told her I was fine. She did not accept that answer. She said she heard about the dinner. She said Lena had mentioned it to a cousin in a way that made me sound unreasonable. She said the story was spreading in a neat, simple version where I was the problem. I told Tanya I was not surprised. I told her I was handling it. Tanya said handling it did not mean paying for disrespect. She said I could love Kyle and still refuse to be used. She said it was okay to let him feel consequences. I did not argue with her. I knew she was right. After the call, I sat in my office and stared at my calendar again. The reminder was still there, 1 week from the dinner. I had circled it in red ink earlier, not because I liked drama, but because I wanted a clean timeline. Then I made one phone call. Marissa Patel was a family attorney I had met years ago through a colleague. I did not hire her during my divorce because things were calm enough to manage with standard paperwork, but I had kept her number. She was the kind of person who spoke clearly and did not sell emotions. When she answered, I told her I needed guidance on boundaries with an adult child. I told her I wanted everything done cleanly. I told her I did not want threats, and I did not want chaos. I only wanted to end optional support that was being treated like entitlement. Marissa asked a few simple questions. She asked Kyle's age. She asked what support was voluntary. She asked what items were in my name. She asked what communication existed in writing. I answered calmly. I did not exaggerate. I did not insult anyone. I only stated facts. Marissa told me we could structure it properly. She told me the goal was clarity. She said the key was giving notice, keeping a record, and avoiding emotional language. She said institutions respect consistency, not speeches. I told her that was exactly what I wanted. When I ended the call, the house was quiet. The printer light blinked once, then settled. My laptop fan hummed softly. I looked at the folder on my desk, the one labeled by month. I looked at the USB drive beside it. Then I looked at the calendar. I was done arguing for respect. From that point forward, I was going to require it. My meeting with Marissa was 2 days later. I chose a coffee shop near the courthouse because it was neutral. It was also busy enough that nobody would start a scene. The room smelled like espresso and warm bread. People typed on laptops. A few talked quietly in pairs. Marissa arrived on time. She wore simple clothes and carried a thin folder. She did not sit down like a friend coming to comfort me. She sat down like a person coming to build a clean plan. I told her I wanted to set boundaries with my adult son. I told her I did not want to fight. I told her I only wanted to end optional support that was being treated like a right. I also told her I wanted to keep my words calm and my steps legal. Marissa asked what I paid for. She asked what was voluntary. She asked what was connected to my name. She asked if I had messages and dates that showed the tone change. I explained the support items in simple categories. I told her about the phone line. I told her about the spending card. I told her about the car costs and insurance parts. I told her about the requests that were no longer requests. Marissa listened and took notes. She said the key was to separate feelings from access. She said I could love my son and still end financial access. She said I needed a clean notice, simple language, and a timeline. She said I should not argue about character. She said I should only describe choices and consequences. I asked her what not to do. She told me not to threaten. She told me not to write long emotional messages. She told me not to use insults. She told me not to bargain for respect. She said bargaining teaches people that disrespect has a price. That line stayed with me. When we finished, I walked out of the coffee shop feeling lighter, not because I felt happy, but because I had a structure. That afternoon, I made a list of practical steps. I did not write it like revenge. I wrote it like a safety checklist. I started with the things that could hurt me if something went wrong. I had learned at work that risk is not about fear, it is about exposure. If your name is tied to something, you can be pulled into the cost. The car was the first exposure, the spending card was the second, the phone line was the third. I did not change anything yet. I only prepared. The next day, I went to a phone carrier kiosk inside a small shopping center. I did not go to be dramatic. I went because I needed facts. I needed to know what control I had and what process existed. The employee was polite. I explained that I was the account holder. I said I needed to understand how authorized users worked. I asked what happened if I removed a line. I asked what notice was required. I asked what records the company kept. I kept my voice low. I did not tell a story. I did not bring up my divorce. I did not mention Lena or Grant. I only asked process questions. The employee answered in a neutral way. She showed me general options on the screen. She explained how billing cycles worked. She explained what I could do and what I should not do if I wanted to avoid confusion. I thanked her and left. I did not change the phone line that day. I just made sure I understood the steps. On the drive home, I saw a message from Kyle. He said he needed the spending limit raised before the weekend. He said he had plans. He said he was not going to be the only one who looked unprepared. He said Grant agreed with him and told him I was being stubborn. I read it once. Then I saved it with the others. I replied with one short sentence. I told Kyle I was reviewing everything and I would update him soon. He answered quickly. He told me not to take too long. He told me he was tired of waiting for me to act like a father. I did not reply. The next morning at work, Omar asked if I wanted to grab a quick coffee in the break area. Omar had a steady way of speaking. He did not push. He did not pry. He simply noticed when something was off. I told him I was dealing with a family problem and I was trying to keep it clean. I told him I did not want to be pulled into an emotional back and forth. Omar told me that clean does not mean cold. He told me clean means clear. He said the moment you start explaining your feelings, people will argue with your feelings. He said the moment you state terms and timelines, the argument becomes harder for them. I told him I agreed. I told him I was keeping records. Omar said records are only useful if they are organized. He said dates matter. He said simple notes matter. He said a calm pattern is more powerful than a dramatic moment. That was how I already lived, so I did not need to change who I was. I only needed to stop giving access to people who treated my calm like weakness. That evening, Lena sent a message with a new tone. She said Kyle was upset. She said he felt rejected. She said I needed to be careful because young men can make bad choices when they feel ignored. I could see what she was doing. She was trying to put fear in my hands so I would keep paying. She was trying to make my support feel like a safety switch that only I controlled. I replied that I wanted Kyle safe and stable, and I would handle things properly. Lena answered that properly sounded like punishment. She said Kyle deserved patience. I did not argue with her either. I had spent too many months trying to get her to admit what was obvious. Lena liked the comfort of my support, and she liked the status of Grant's performance. She wanted both. I was not going to keep funding that balance. Over the next few days, I quietly positioned myself. I backed up more messages. I included the dinner night spending alert. I included Kyle's demands. I included Lena's attempts to pressure me. I saved call times and dates too. I did not need to record calls. I only needed a clean timeline. I also checked my calendar and built a simple schedule. I wrote down when Kyle's phone bill cycle reset. I wrote down when the car insurance payment processed. I wrote down when the spending card limit refreshed. These were the moments where my choices would take effect without chaos. I did not want confusion. I did not want surprise charges bouncing and turning into emergencies. I wanted a controlled change. Kyle, of course, did not know I was doing any of this. To him, I was still predictable. I was still the quiet man who would give in if pushed. That belief made him bold. On Friday, Kyle sent another message. He said he needed money for school. He attached no proof. He said I was embarrassing him again by making him ask more than once. I replied that if it was school, he could forward the school email. I told him I would pay a verified fee directly if needed. Kyle did not send an email. He sent a screenshot of a shopping cart. It included clothes and event tickets. I stared at it and felt no surprise at all. I replied that I would not fund that. Kyle answered with a string of short messages. He said I was controlling. He said I was jealous of Grant. He said I was acting small. He said he could not wait until he never needed me again. I saved the messages. Then I closed the app. I did not answer. That night, I went to my garage and looked at the small set of spare keys I kept for the car. I did not take them. I did not hide them. I simply looked at them and thought about how much meaning Kyle had poured into that car. To him, it was freedom and image. To me, it was liability and cost. The next morning, Lena called. Her voice was tight and controlled. She told me Kyle had plans. She told me Kyle was a good kid. She told me I was being difficult because my pride was hurt. I told her I was not discussing pride. I told her I was discussing boundaries. I told her Kyle was an adult and could make adult choices. Lena tried a new angle. She said Grant had been patient with me. She said Grant was trying to build a healthy family. She said I was ruining it by refusing to cooperate. I told her I was not part of her new household. I told her I was Kyle's father, and that was the only role I needed. Lena went quiet for a moment. Then she said we should all meet again. She said we needed a serious conversation, not texting. She suggested a family sit-down near Kyle's campus so Kyle would feel supported. I agreed, but again, I shaped the setting. I said we should meet in an official place, not a restaurant. I said a public office would keep everyone calm. I said a student services building or campus office would be appropriate, since Kyle kept claiming everything was about school. Lena hesitated. Then she said fine. A few hours later, a new family group chat appeared. It included me, Lena, Kyle, and Grant. Grant immediately sent a message. He said he wanted respect and mature behavior. He said he wanted to be clear that Kyle needed support, not cold distance. He said he expected me to show up and listen. I did not respond. Kyle sent his own message. He said I needed to stop acting like I was the victim. He said I needed to accept the new reality. He said he was done with my rules. I saved those too. Then Lena sent the meeting details. A weekday afternoon at the Student Services building near campus. She framed it as a problem-solving meeting. She said she wanted peace. I read the details and felt calm again. An official place meant staff nearby. It meant witnesses who were not family. It meant less room for acting. Over the next 2 days, the tone in the group chat got worse. Grant wrote long messages about leadership and responsibility. He described himself like a mentor. He suggested I had failed Kyle by being too quiet. He suggested the best thing I could do now was step aside and still contribute financially. Kyle liked those messages. He reacted quickly. He added his own comments about how I never showed up in the right way. Lena did not stop them. Lena only posted smiling reminders about the meeting time, like she was managing a calendar, not a family. I did not argue in the chat. I did not defend myself there. I only responded once, with one sentence. I said I would attend, and I expected the conversation to stay respectful. Grant replied that respect is earned. I did not reply to that either. On my side, I stayed practical. I reviewed my notes. I checked my dates again. I put together an inventory of Kyle's items still in my house. I placed a few storage boxes in my trunk so I could move those items cleanly later, if needed. I did not want Kyle showing up and turning my driveway into a stage. I also kept my behavior steady at work. I did not want my personal stress to leak into my professional life. I kept my meetings. I met my deadlines. I did not vent to coworkers. The calm was important. Calm is not only a mood. Calm is a message. It says I am not scrambling. It says I am not afraid. It says I can wait. The day before the campus meeting, Kyle sent one last demand. He said he needed the spending limit raised immediately. He said he had plans that night. He said if I refused, it would prove everything he said at dinner. I looked at the message and felt something settle. Kyle still believed he could control me with shame. I did not reply right away. I saved the message. I backed up the folder again. Then I closed my laptop and went to bed at my normal time. In the morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and dressed like it was a normal day. I did not wear anything special. I did not wear anything dramatic. I wore the same kind of simple clothes I wore to work. Before leaving, I stood in my home office for a moment and looked at my calendar. The date was there, clean and clear. The meeting time was written in block letters. Then I picked up my keys and drove toward campus, quiet and steady, as if I was going to a routine appointment. The day of the campus meeting started like any other workday. I woke up early. I made coffee. I ate a simple breakfast. I did not check the group chat right away. I did not want my mood controlled by other people's messages. I went into my home office and looked at the folder system I had built. It was not dramatic. It was not secret. It was just organized, dates, notes, screenshots, a clear timeline. I did not plan a speech. I did not plan a clever moment. I planned something much smaller. I planned to stop being the quiet support that everyone felt free to step on. I had learned something important from my job. If you want a clean change, you do not argue with emotions. You set terms, you set a timeline, You make sure you are allowed to do what you are doing, then you do it. 2 days before the meeting, I went to a storage unit facility. I chose one close to my house with good lighting and clear rules. The employee gave me a short tour. I signed up for a small unit, nothing fancy. I wanted a clean place to move Kyle's leftover items if things became messy. Kyle did not have many things at my house anymore, but he still had some. A box of old school papers, a few hoodies, a sports bag, some electronics cables, small items that turn into big arguments when people want a reason to create trouble. That night, I walked through my hallway closet and my spare room. I placed Kyle's items into sturdy boxes. I labeled each box with a simple description. I also took quick photos of the box contents before closing them, just to keep it clear and calm later. I did not do it to punish him. I did it to prevent a scene. If Kyle came to my house angry, I did not want him moving through my rooms and claiming things were missing. I kept the boxes in the garage, stacked neatly. I did not send Kyle a message about it. I did not announce it. I simply prepared. The next step was communication. I did not want emotional calls. Calls turn into confusion fast. People forget what they said. People claim you said things you did not say. So I drafted one short message to Kyle. I kept it plain. I did not accuse him. I did not insult him. I did not talk about my feelings. I wrote that our relationship mattered to me, but the financial support would be changing. I wrote that I would explain it in person at the meeting, and I expected the conversation to stay respectful. I did not send it yet. I saved it. That same evening, I made a few quiet phone calls. One call was to the phone carrier. I asked the same process questions again, this time with the billing cycle in front of me. I asked how notice worked. I asked how a line could be moved to a new account holder. I asked how the company confirmed identity. I did not mention Kyle's behavior. I did not mention the dinner. I only confirmed what was possible and what was clean. Another call was to my bank's support line from my personal phone. I asked about authorized user access on a linked card. I asked how long changes took. I asked what records appeared on my account history. The representative gave neutral answers. He treated it like a normal request because it was. The last call was to Marissa. I told her the campus meeting had been scheduled and Grant was included. I asked how to keep my words simple and safe. She told me to keep it short. She told me to stay calm. She told me not to let Grant pull me into a debate. She reminded me that I did not need anyone's agreement to end voluntary support. She told me to state decisions and timelines, then stop talking. After that call, I felt steady. I did not feel excited. I did not feel proud. I felt ready. Meanwhile, the group chat stayed active. Kyle posted short messages that sounded like demands. Grant posted longer messages that sounded like a lecture. Lena posted reminders about the meeting time, like the conflict was a calendar problem. Grant wrote that he expected me to show up like a mature adult. He wrote that Kyle needed stability. He wrote that a father's job was to give support without making it about himself. Kyle replied that I always made things difficult. He wrote that I had to stop hiding behind rules. He wrote that I needed to accept the new order in the family. I did not respond. I let their messages sit there like a record of their mood and intent. People who feel safe often reveal more than they realize. On the morning before the meeting, I moved the boxes into my trunk and drove to the storage unit. I loaded them in quietly. I did not rush. I did not slam doors. I locked the unit and kept the key on my key ring. Then I went home and cleaned my kitchen. It sounds small, but it mattered. Cleaning kept me calm. It also reminded me that my home was still my home. I did not want other people's chaos sitting in my space. That afternoon, Tanya called again. She asked where the meeting was. She asked who would be there. She asked if I was safe. I told her it was in a campus building, in daylight, with staff nearby. I told her I was not expecting a scene, but I wanted witnesses and structure. Tanya said she respected that. She told me to keep my tone steady and avoid long explanations. She told me that people who want control often try to pull you into defending your character. I told her I understood. I told her I was focused on boundaries, not arguments. That night, I slept well. I did not scroll through messages in bed. I did not rehearse comebacks. I did not imagine the perfect sentence. I simply slept. In the morning, I woke up early again. I made coffee. I checked my calendar. I saw the meeting time. I saw my normal work tasks after it. Life did not stop because my family was confused. Before leaving, I opened the group chat one time. Kyle had posted a final message late the night before. He wrote that I needed to raise the spending limit immediately. He wrote that he had plans. He wrote that if I did not do it, it would show everyone who I really was. Grant responded with a message about leadership and responsibility, framing Kyle's demands as a young man's needs. Lena wrote that she hoped we could all be calm and solve this. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I put the phone down. That was the last time I looked at the chat before the meeting. I dressed like I was going to work. Simple shirt, clean shoes, nothing that looked like I was trying to impress anyone. I was not there to perform. I also placed a small notebook in my bag. It held only short notes, like reminders for myself. Stay calm. Speak slowly. State terms. Do not debate. End the conversation if it becomes disrespectful. I did not bring a stack of papers. I did not bring anything that looked like a courtroom. I wanted the setting to stay normal. The power of my approach was that it was simple and lawful, not theatrical. I left my house with time to spare. The drive to campus was calm. The streets were busy, but not stressful. I parked in a lot near the Student Services building. While I walked, I noticed how relaxed other people looked. Students carried backpacks, staff walked with coffee cups. Nobody knew what my meeting meant. Nobody cared. That was part of the point. At the edge of the lot, a tow truck sat in a shaded area, not moving. It looked like it was waiting for a call or a location. I did not stare at it. I simply noticed it and kept walking. When I got close to the building, I saw Lena first. She stood with her arms crossed, looking at her phone. Grant stood near her, shoulders back, scanning the area like he expected to be in charge of it. Kyle leaned against a low wall, looking bored. Kyle looked up and saw me. He did not smile. He did not nod. He simply watched me approach like I was late to a job I owed him. I walked up and greeted them with a simple hello. I did not speak to Grant like he was my equal in my relationship with my son. I did not speak to him like he was my enemy either. I treated him like a person who was present. Lena told me we should be quick because Kyle had a class later. Grant said we needed to be honest and firm. Kyle said he hoped I was ready to act like a father. I did not respond to that line. I only said we should go inside. We walked into the Student Services building together. The air inside felt cool and quiet. The floors were clean. The walls had posters about scheduling and support programs. It smelled like paper and disinfectant. At the front desk, a staff member looked up and asked how she could help. Lena gave our names and said we had an appointment. The staff member nodded and told us to sit in the waiting area. We sat down in a row, like strangers waiting for an interview. Kyle kept tapping his foot. Grant kept checking his phone. Lena stared straight ahead. I sat quietly and watched the hallway doors. A moment later, a staff member stepped out and called our names. She gestured for us to follow her toward an office area, and we all stood up and walked after her. The staff member led us into a small office with 4 chairs and a round table. A nameplate on the desk read Ms. Rudd. She spoke in a calm, professional tone. She said this meeting was for student support and problem solving. She said she would keep it respectful and structured. Lena nodded quickly and said she was grateful. Grant leaned back and said he appreciated discipline. Kyle crossed his arms and looked at me like he expected me to surrender. Ms. Rudd asked why we were there. Lena said Kyle was under pressure. She said his father was being difficult about support. She said Kyle needed stability and a clear plan. Grant added that Kyle was a young man trying to build his future. He said I was holding him back with rules and delays. He said Kyle needed a stronger foundation and less hesitation. Kyle said I had been acting cold. He said I walked out of dinner and embarrassed him. He said I was trying to control him with money. Ms. Rudd listened without reacting. Then she turned to me and asked what I wanted out of the meeting. I told her I wanted clarity and boundaries. I told her Kyle was an adult, and I respected that. I also told her that adult status came with adult responsibility. I said I would not continue optional support while being treated like a tool. Grant tried to cut in and said this was family business, not an office issue. Ms. Rudd calmly reminded him that we were in her office and she would guide the conversation. She asked me what support I was providing and what I planned to change. I took out a thin folder from my bag and placed it on the table. I kept my hands steady. I did not slam it down. I opened it and slid a few pages forward so Ms. Rudd could see headings and dates. I told her I had prepared a simple summary of voluntary support items that were in my name. I said I was not here to argue about feelings. I was here to end confusion. Kyle leaned forward and said I was being dramatic. He said I was trying to scare him. I told him I was doing the opposite. I told him I was removing uncertainty. I told him I should have done it earlier. Ms. Rudd asked what the items were. I started with the spending card. I told her Kyle had been an authorized user on a card linked to my account. I said it was never a permanent right. I said it was a convenience I kept in place while he treated me with basic respect. I said that changed after the dinner and the messages that followed. Kyle said he needed that card for school and transportation. He said I could not just switch it off. I told him I had already done it, cleanly, through the bank process. I told him the authorization had ended and the card would not function. I said he would not have access to my account anymore. Lena's face tightened. She asked when I did that. I told her I made the change after I reviewed the timeline and after I gave myself a few days to act calmly. I said it was not impulsive. I said it was a boundary. Grant said I was punishing Kyle. He said real fathers do not pull support away. I looked at him and kept my voice even. I told him real adults do not demand access while disrespecting the person providing it. I told him Kyle had declared he did not need me as a father. I said I was simply aligning support with that claim. Ms. Rudd asked about the phone. I told her Kyle's phone line was on my plan. I said I had kept it there for convenience since he was younger. I said Kyle would have 30 days to move the line to his own account or to Lena's household account. I said I had a printed notice of the timeline and the carrier steps. I slid the page toward Ms. Rudd. Kyle said he could not handle that in 30 days. He said I was trying to isolate him. I told him 30 days was reasonable. I told him the carrier had a simple transfer process. I told him I had confirmed it. I said if he could organize plans and events, he could organize a phone account. Ms. Rudd asked about the car. That was the moment the air changed. Kyle sat up straighter, like that was the real issue. I told Ms. Rudd the car Kyle drove was in my name. I said I had allowed Kyle to use it as long as he followed basic rules and communicated respectfully. I said my name carried the risk if anything went wrong. I said I would not keep that risk while being treated like I was irrelevant. Kyle said the car was his life. He said he had classes and work options. He said I could not take it away just because my feelings were hurt. I told him this was not about feelings. I told him it was about responsibility and liability. I said he was free to get his own vehicle, insure it, and carry the cost himself. I said that was what adults do. Lena asked if I was serious. I told her I was serious. I told her I had already updated the insurance on my end, so I was not carrying ongoing risk tied to Kyle's daily use. I said the car would no longer be available to him after today. Kyle's voice rose. He said this was unfair. He said Grant would never do this. I glanced at Grant and said then Grant could solve it. I said Grant had been presented as the stronger provider at the dinner. I said this was his moment to lead. Grant opened his mouth, then paused. His confidence looked less solid for the first time. He said he was not on the title. He said he could not just take over overnight. Ms. Rudd asked where Kyle was living. Lena answered quickly and said Kyle lived with her. Then she added that Kyle sometimes stayed with me when he wanted space. I told Ms. Rudd that was true in the past. I said I had kept a room available because I wanted Kyle to feel welcome. I said that room was no longer available under the current dynamic. I said I had moved Kyle's remaining items out of my home and into a storage unit under my control. I said Kyle could pick up his things from me at a scheduled time, calmly. Kyle looked at Lena like he expected her to correct me. Lena looked away. Kyle said he could not stay with Grant. He said Grant always treated him like a project. He said the house was tense. Grant shifted in his chair and said Kyle needed to learn gratitude. Ms. Rudd held up a hand and asked Kyle what his immediate plan was for housing and transportation. Kyle had no clear answer. He looked between Lena and Grant. He said they would figure it out. He said I was supposed to be part of the solution. I told him I was being part of the solution by being honest. I told him the solution was not me continuing to fund a life where I was publicly dismissed. I said Kyle could still have a relationship with me, but it would be based on respect, not access. Ms. Rudd nodded slowly. She said she could connect Kyle with campus resources, budgeting help, part-time job listings, and emergency support options if needed. She said she could not force a parent to provide voluntary support to an adult child. She said her role was to help Kyle plan. Kyle tried one last push. He said, I would regret this. He said I was choosing rules over family. I told him I was choosing clarity over confusion. I told him my door was open for a respectful conversation, but my accounts and my name were not open for casual use. Ms. Rudd ended the meeting with a summary. She said Kyle would need to secure his own phone plan, transportation plan, and spending plan. She said she would email Kyle a list of resources. She said the next steps were practical, not emotional. We walked out into the hallway. Kyle moved fast, ahead of everyone, like he wanted to escape the feeling of being seen. Outside, the parking lot felt brighter than before. The tow truck I had noticed earlier rolled forward and stopped near the car Kyle had been using. The driver stepped out and looked at me for confirmation. Kyle froze. He looked back at me, then at Lena, then at Grant. I told Kyle I was not doing this to embarrass him. I told him this was the clean end of access. I told him he could arrange his own ride home. Lena's hands started shaking. She asked where Kyle would go tonight. Grant stood still and said very little. I watched the driver finish his work in a routine, professional way. No shouting, no drama, just a process. Kyle's shoulders dropped as the reality landed. I got into my car and drove away without looking back. That night, my phone rang, and Lena's name lit up the screen over and over.